Hey gang, welcome back to Rails New. This is a beginner-friendly series on how to build real applications with Ruby on Rails. In the last few videos, we built the foundation of an amazing to-do app that we're calling Doable. If you haven't watched the previous videos, then be sure to subscribe, watch those, and then come back here when you're all caught up. Now, so far, we've created projects and to-dos, we've saved them to a database, we've listed them out, updated them, and even deleted a few. All of this with simple Ruby commands like project.all or to-do.find with an ID. But here's the thing. We've actually been using something super powerful behind the scenes that we haven't even really talked about yet. That thing we've been using, of course, is called ActiveRecord. And today, we're gonna take a deep dive into what ActiveRecord is and why it works so smoothly. Let's get into it. Okay, so really quick, here's a greatest hits list of what we've done so far in our app Doable using ActiveRecord. All of these little Ruby commands using our models are actually using ActiveRecord under the hood. Project.all to find all of our projects, to-do.find with an ID in our params, updating projects and deleting projects. Behind the scenes, these are all generating SQL queries, but we didn't write SQL, we're just using these cute little Ruby methods. And throughout this video series, we keep saying ActiveRecord this, ActiveRecord that, but what is it actually doing for us? Basically, ActiveRecord is the part of Rails that lets you use Ruby to talk to your database. Instead of writing raw SQL queries, you write Ruby methods and ActiveRecord converts them under the hood. So essentially, ActiveRecord gives you expressive and secure tools for working with data. It's one of the things that makes Rails feel so smooth, especially in the early stages of building an app. Okay, enough talk. Let's see ActiveRecord in action here. Go to our terminal and let's fire up Rails console. We've done this a bunch of times before. It is bin/Rails space C. That will open up Rails console for us. Okay, let's go with a simple one that we've actually used already before in this video series, project.find with an ID of 1. Now you see that SQL printed out? That's ActiveRecord translating your Ruby into a real database query. Let's actually use another one. We can do project.all and it actually gets all of our projects. And once again, we see that ActiveRecord has translated project.all into a query that selects all of our projects from the database. By the way, did you notice this limit 11 that we see on this query we just ran in Rails console? You see, that's Rails console being smart. It automatically limits queries from your database so it doesn't display a whole bunch of data on your screen all at once. The real SQL query doesn't actually have this limit. It's added to it in Rails console. And you know what's even cooler? We actually haven't written any of this logic in our model. If we open up our model, we can see that in project, it's basically empty. We just have a validation and that's it. Even more so impressive is our to-do class, which is a model that is literally 100% empty. So how does this know how to do any of the things that we just showed off in the terminal here? Well, it's all thanks to inheritance. You see, our models like project and to-do are actually a child of application record, which is a child of ActiveRecord base. You can think of it this way. We have a little bit of a family tree here, right? ActiveRecord base is the grandparent, application record is actually the parent, and your model is the newest generation. And just like in real families, certain things get passed down. Man, this metaphor is really cool, huh? So in this case, these methods like .find, .where, .create, and destroy, these all live in ActiveRecord base and gets passed down to the classes that inherit it. Okay, really quick, let's just draw a super scientific diagram of what we're talking about. So basically it all starts with ActiveRecord. ActiveRecord contains all of these amazing functions that we can use to actually interact with our database. The functions within ActiveRecord are things like .where, .find, .destroy, and so on and so forth. And then in our application, we have a file called application record that actually inherits from ActiveRecord. We can actually see it in our application here. Application record inherits from ActiveRecord base. So application record is really just a place where we put some behavior that we want all of our models to share, because our models in fact inherit from application record. So anything inside of application record will be inherited in our models here. So then within application record, we now have all of our models like to do and project. So this is how inheritance actually works. You see, to do and project inherits from application record, and application record inherits from active record. And so what happens is that to do and project, our models also get all of the active record goodies like .where, .find, and .destroy, the things that we actually showed off in our terminal right here. So the next time you see a model with an empty class definition, just remember it's still got a lot of stuff going on under the hood. Now, as we started thinking about the types of queries we might want to run in Doable, a few scenarios popped up that we didn't account for when we first built the application. First of all, like, what if a to-do is already completed or gets completed? Or what if it's a high priority task that should float to the top of the list? And when a project is finished, do we really want it to show up in the active list forever? Like that. See, now personally, I don't need to keep seeing that one project idea I had that I totally thought was going to take off right after I bought the domain name. I don't need to see that anymore. I don't want to be reminded of my past mistakes. So our current data model doesn't really store any of that info. So let's make a couple database migrations and update our schema so we can actually track this stuff. So now I'm going to create a couple of migrations to update the schema of our database, and then I'll break them down as I go along. So now let's generate a new migration, which is bin Rails generate. And we want to generate, like I said, a migration, and this migration could be called something like add completed and priority to to-dos. We want to add two new fields, completed, which is a Boolean, and priority, which is an integer. Okay, let's hit enter here, and we have now generated our migration. Now let's add one more field to our project by generating another migration for our project model. And in our project, we want to add active to projects. And we want to add an active field, which is a Boolean. We want to see if a project is still active or if I've given up on my hopes and dreams to create the new Tinder for dogs and cats. Hit enter. And we have now created another migration for adding active as a Boolean to our projects. So now one thing you might have noticed is that we have a field : type format like completed, Boolean, or priority integer. That tells Rails what kind of column to create in the database. So completed Boolean becomes a true false column, and priority : integer is just a number we can sort or filter on. Now you can add as many fields as you want here, or you can leave them out and just write them directly in the migration file. You don't have to actually use the CLI. You could tweak them yourself if you want. In fact, let's tweak these migration files and set some sensible defaults. We can open up our editor and go to these new migration files that we just created. Let's start off with add completed and priority to to-dos. So now in this migration file, we want to add some sensible defaults. Our Boolean should be a default of false, and we should give it a null of false as well, meaning that it cannot be null in our database. And then the priority, which is an integer, should also have a default, and we want to set that one to, let's say, 1, and we also want to make sure that it cannot be null in our database. This is what's called a database constraint. We cannot have null values being pushed into our database. We could validate this stuff in our model level, but we also want to make sure that on a database level, this data actually cannot get in with nulls. Make sense? Okay, great. Let's move on. Now we want to update the other migration file we created as well, our active Boolean. We want to make sure that that default is actually set to true because we want to make sure that all projects are true by default. And we want to make sure that, once again, we don't allow null fields in our database for this column in the table. Okay, great. Now we can run back to our terminal and run bin Rails db migrate. And then that's it. We've evolved our schema, and ActiveRecord already knows about the new fields with no extra setup needed. If you want to double check, we can go into our schema.rb file, and we can see now that within our projects table, we have a new Boolean called active. It is defaulted to true, and it is not allowing any null fields in the database. And then if we scroll down to to-dos here, we see we have a new Boolean called completed. This is defaulted to false with no nulls, and an integer called priority, which again is defaulted to 1 with null as false. We have now updated our schema, and we're good to go. Okay, so now let's have a little bit of fun querying by these new attributes that we added to our tables. We can open up bin Rails console here, and we can type something like, I don't know, to-do.where completed is false .order by priority descending. There we go. Now we can see here that it gives us a similar result as to if we just type something like todo.all, but we can see in this actual SQL here that Rails generated for us, that ActiveRecord generated for us, we are selecting to-dos from the to-do table where to-dos.completed is false, or represented as a 0 in our database, and we are ordering those to-dos by the priority in a descending way. Now this is already transcribing the correct SQL query for us so that when we have all these to-dos, we can do some interesting things with them and with that data. We can also check something like our project.where active is true, and we want to limit that by 5. This is another query that you can run using ActiveRecord that looks just so easy, but as we can see, it generates some really interesting SQL so that we can limit the amount that we get back from the database, and we can also make sure we sort by active true on our projects. These are just like really simple commands, but it gives us a lot of power with ActiveRecord and our models. And again, if we want to create some new records, we can create a new to-do here with the name is, I don't know, fix production bug. And the completed is false. And our priority is, let's just say it's a 3. It's not a super high priority thing, even though it's a bug in production. Now, if we scroll up with the up arrow, we can try that query again for to-dos, and we can order it by priority. And we see that when we sort by priority descending, it is priority as 3. And if we sort by ascending, our priority comes back as number 1 is the top and number 3 is the bottom. Descending, number 3 is the top, number 1 is the bottom. It's just super easy to play with this stuff, and it's really, really fun. Also, something to keep in mind, when we don't specify a priority or completed status, ActiveRecord uses the defaults we set in the migration. So priority 1, completed false, that will keep our data consistent even when we forget to fill in every single field. And again, if we check todo.first.attributes, we have the default values for priority and completed, even though we didn't actually set them when we created this to do. Okay, so now if we want to debug something and we want to look at the actual SQL query that's being run without actually running the thing, we can type at the end of one of our ActiveRecord statements .to_SQL. This shows you the SQL without actually running it, which is super useful when you're building more complex queries and you're trying to figure out how these things are being joined together in a database. Super helpful. Now, also on top of all this, you might be wondering, what if I need to run a really custom SQL query that ActiveRecord doesn't quite cover? And ActiveRecord has a great answer for you. You can always drop down to find by SQL, which lets you write your own select statements together. So we can do to-do.find by SQL, and this SQL can be select star from to-dos where, let's say, I don't know, completed is false. And there we go. That's how you can use SQL raw in ActiveRecord. But just remember, you're on your own for safety at that point. Rails can't protect you from SQL injection here. Don't be the dev who accidentally invites little Bobby tables to the party. So to recap, ActiveRecord gives you a clean Ruby interface to your database. Rails conventions make it seamless, and inheritance gives you all of that querying power without any boilerplate. And as your app grows, your data model can grow with it. Migrations make it super easy to manage your data schema over time. Now in the next video, we're going to connect the dots between our models, projects, and to-dos. You see, they shouldn't just be floating around, they're connected, and ActiveRecord can make defining this relationship super, super easy. So in the next video, we're going to connect our projects and our to-dos together. There we go. So stick around for the next video, and hey, thanks nerds.